people pleading for small mercies. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's bring in Simone Ledeen. She's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and a partner of Texas Venture Partners. Great to have you on the BBC. U.S. officials have been saying for a long time, really, that Yahya Sinwar was one of the biggest obstacles to a potential ceasefire deal. Will his death now, do you think, open a bigger door to getting a ceasefire done?
Well, I do think that it presents a real opportunity for both the Palestinians and Israelis. But I think the Palestinians first need to make the move to put down their arms and return the hostages. As the Israelis have said, the war will end tomorrow if they do that. Now that Yahya Sinwar is removed from the equation, it's much more likely that that could happen, and I certainly hope it does.
What about on the Israeli side? How willing do you think they might be to agree a ceasefire deal, given, of course, some of the recent successes it has had, ignoring the calls to put down weapons, continuing with this offensive? We've been seeing Israel take out several top leaders of not only Hamas, but also Hezbollah.
Well, I think it's important to remember that for Israel, this is a defensive war. This is a war that was begun against them. They were in a ceasefire situation on October 6th, 2023. So I think it's always important to remember that. And I also think that it's in a way cruel to incessantly demand slowing down and dropping out of this war for the Israelis when they're fighting for their very existence and the safety of their civilian population. So I think that the first step is a ceasefire on the side of Hamas. And now that they've lost their leadership, I think it's a real opportunity for them to take this and move forward with the full support of the international community, who so wants to support them and help them to rebuild and create a new way forward.
Where do you think this leaves Iran in all of this? The top leaders of two of its main proxies, speaking of Hezbollah, of course, and Hamas, have now been killed by Israel in recent days, and we're expecting a counterattack any day now, really, by Israel after Iran sent that large missile barrage.
Well, I think the Iranian regime has shown that it has grossly miscalculated over and over again, and has shown its weak position in several instances, and has really seen its terror proxies decapitated by Israel in a way that certainly the regime must never have expected. So I think they're certainly on their heels right now. And so really it's an opportunity to press forward, to be a little bit aggressive with them, to not allow them to rebuild and regain the strength that we saw from their terror proxies in the past.
Speaking from your former role as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, there are now U.S. troops on the ground in Israel. We believe about 100 of them are there to provide some defensive support for Israel if there is indeed any sort of attack on Iran. But having those troops there, does that raise the stakes potentially of the U.S. becoming more involved in this conflict at all?
I think it certainly does. I think we only need to imagine a scenario where an Iranian missile strikes a location where there are U.S. service members to understand how the stakes would be raised. I would like to note we did have U.S. service members on the ground in Gaza during that whole Gaza Pier situation that failed in the end. So this isn't the first time that U.S. troops have been on the ground in the region, in the area specifically. But yes, it could raise the stakes, and I think also when we're considering the defensive equipment that's being used, and looking at the threats that are coming into Israel, in particular with these drone swarms, we need to look at what equipment is being used. And is it really effective against those threats?
All right, Simone Ledeen, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden has been making what's likely